At the reading of the will, my son, Dominic, and his wife, Chanel, were already celebrating their victory. Chanel leaned in and whispered to me, "Rhonda Sterling, start packing. I'm giving you 24 hours to clear out." Dominic wouldn't even look my way, but suddenly Arthur Coleman, the attorney, stopped them. "My apologies. I missed the final line." "Your husband didn't leave the house to either of you. He left a video recording. Look at the screen. Now your son will find out that we know everything about him." Hello, dear listeners. Before we begin this story, I want to ask you a favor. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and tell us in the comments what country you're listening from. It helps our community grow so much. Now get comfortable. Enjoy the listening. The house smelled of heavy frankincense and wilting lilies, a thick, cloying scent that seemed to settle on my clothes like heavy dust. I stood by the parlor window, watching the gray clouds hang low over our wealthy neighborhood, Cedar Heights. The mirrors, draped in heavy cloth, reflected nothing, but I already knew I looked like a ghost. At my own husband's funeral, I wasn't the lady of the house. I was a prop, an old piece of furniture they forgot to clear out before the important guests arrived. Dominic Sterling, my son, held court in the center of the room. He wore a flawless, custom-tailored black suit and that practiced expression, grief-stricken, yet full of restrained dignity, that he'd perfected during his years in the city council. People, officials, developers, power brokers I'd never seen in our home while Elias was alive, approached him. They patted his shoulder, nodded, and spoke of an irreplaceable loss. No one approached me. To them, I was just an old woman in a black headscarf, a widow whose time had run out with her husband's last breath. I stepped back into the shadow of the heavy drapes when I heard the sharp click of heels. Chanel Sterling, my daughter-in-law. She glided through the room like a black swan, soaking up the attention. She wore a sleek black dress, far too revealing for a wake, but perfect for the society columns. She took Dominic's arm and leaned into his ear. Their voices were low, but my hearing, sharpened by 40 years of work in the quiet of judicial archives, caught every word. "When can we start the reno?" she asked, not even glancing my way. "This house is a crypt, and that annex where your mother keeps all her papers? It's a fire code nightmare." Dominic grimaced, as if fighting a headache, and checked the time on his expensive watch. "Be patient, Chanel. The will reading is tomorrow. After that, the bulldozers can roll in by evening. We'll take down that office first thing. I need the space for a pool table." Something clenched tight in my chest, cold and sharp. My office. My war room, as Elias used to joke. In those perfectly organized card files rested the history not just of our family, but of half the county. For 40 years, I had been the chief judicial administrator for the County Superior Court. I knew every subparagraph of the state civil code, every comma in procedural norms. Judges came and went, clerks rotated out, but I remained. I was the one who silently sent their cases back for rework, pointing out flaws in dates and language. They thought I was just a cranky old woman, an iron clerk, but my meticulousness had saved their careers from appeal court humiliation. And now my son, my own flesh and blood, wanted to tear it all down for a pool table. I didn't make a sound. I had learned to be invisible. In court, emotion is weakness. Only facts carry weight. The next day, we sat in the office of Arthur Coleman, the attorney, and an old friend of Elias's. The office reeked of old paper and fine cigar smoke, a smell that always calmed me. Arthur, a heavy-set man with a gray beard, sat behind a massive oak desk, shuffling documents. He avoided my eyes, and that worried me more than Chanel's open hostility. Dominic sprawled in his chair, proprietary, leg crossed over his knee. Chanel perched on the edge of her seat, ready to bolt. "Let's skip the formalities, Arthur," Dominic snapped, looking at the ceiling. "I have a board meeting at 3. The attorney slowly took off his glasses, wiped them with a cloth, and put them back on. "Procedure is procedure, Dominic Sterling." He began to read. Standard boilerplate, dry legal language that sounded like music to my ears. Accounts, stock, the car, everything went to the sun. I sat ramrod straight, the chair back digging into my spine. I didn't expect a handout. Elias had always said Dominic needed to maintain appearances, and I needed little. And also the residential home and land located at 425 Oakmont Drive. Arthur's voice wavered. Chanel couldn't wait. She reached into her oversized purse, and with a loud pop that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room, uncorked a small bottle of sparkling wine. Foam spilled down the neck. "Finally," she breathed, without shame. She turned to me, and her eyes held not just triumph, but pure contempt. She leaned in and whispered so only I could hear, "Start packing your things, Rhonda. I'm giving you 24 hours to clear out. No boxes, just personal items. The rest goes to the dumpster." Dominic didn't even flinch, busy texting, mentally disposing of his inheritance. I remained silent. Inside, there were no tears, only a cold clarity. 24 hours. Under the state eviction statute, even a registered occupant whose property ownership changes has at least 30 days unless otherwise decreed by the court. She was bluffing, but she didn't know who she was playing with. "I apologize." Arthur's voice was unexpectedly firm, cutting through the hiss of the sparkling wine. "I failed to read the very last line." Chanel froze, the bottle suspended in the air. Dominic looked up from his phone. "What line?" he asked, annoyed. "Dad always left everything to me. It's tradition." "Your husband, Elias," the attorney looked directly at me, his gaze holding deep respect and, I thought, sympathy, "did not leave the house to either of you. He left a disposition and a video recording." Arthur pressed a button on a remote. A white screen descended on the wall, and the projector whirred to life. Elias's face appeared. He was sitting in his favorite armchair, the one Dominic wanted to throw out. Elias looked tired, the illness clearly taking its toll, but his eyes were sharp and hard. "Dominic," my husband's voice filled the room, making Chanel jump. "Did you think I was blind? Did you really think I didn't see where the money for your firm came from and why funds disappeared from the city budget?" The room went so silent I could hear the wall clock ticking. Dominic turned pale. "That's insane," he hissed. "I am leaving the final decision entirely to my wife, Rhonda," Elias continued from the screen. "She is the only one who knows the combination to the safe. But more importantly, Dominic, she is the only one who knows how to read what's inside. I am not leaving her a house. I am leaving her an archive and the right to decide what to do with it." The image changed. An electronic scan of a document appeared, a blueprint of our estate, stamped in red ink with a demolition permit. Dominic jumped up. "That's a forgery. Turn it off now." I didn't look at my son. My gaze, trained to spot the smallest inconsistency in thousands of lawsuits, was fixed on the screen. I saw the date on the stamp, 3 months ago. The signature was Dominic's. He had planned the demolition while his father was still alive. But it wasn't the date that made my heart skip a beat and then settle into a cold, steady rhythm. It was the seal. The circular, embossed seal that validated the permit. It read, "Beaumont County Zoning Commission." I felt the corners of my mouth twitch into the faintest of smiles. Beaumont County had been administratively dissolved and annexed by the Central District 5 years ago. That seal was defunct. The document was legally null and void. My son, the great politician, wasn't just cruel, he was sloppy, and in my world, sloppiness is a conviction. A professional fury, cold and pure, began to rise within me, pushing aside the grief. I realized the fight had just begun. "This is a deepfake!" Dominic shrieked, his voice cracking into a high pitch, shattering the image of the solid official he'd cultivated for years. "Arthur, are you in on this? This is a cheap fake. My father was out of his mind in his final days, high on morphine." He paced the room, grasping the chair back, the edge of the desk, as if the floor were sinking beneath him. Chanel stood still, her face blotched red. The bottle of sparkling wine in her hand looked ridiculous, like a toy brought to a funeral. I sat motionless. A shift had occurred within me, quiet as a key turning in a well-oiled lock. My son wasn't just cruel, he was legally illiterate. He signed a document bearing the seal of a non-existent authority. He planned to destroy evidence without even checking its legal standing. For 40 years, I've seen men like him. They think power is a shield, forgetting that the law is a sword. And that sword was now in my hand. I slowly rose. The chair barely creaked. I knew how to stand up silently, so as not to disturb a judge while pronouncing a sentence. A heavy, thick silence fell over the office. Dominic stopped mid-sentence, turning to face me. I saw not fear in his eyes, but confusion. The very furniture seemed to lean toward me. The safe key. My voice was even, steady. It was not the voice of a mother. It was the voice of the judicial administrator returning a claim for lack of jurisdiction. You don't need the key, Dominic. He blinked, trying to reorient. Mom, don't start. Just give me the key and we can... You don't need the key, I repeated, taking a step toward him. You need a search warrant, and you don't have the grounds for one. I turned to the attorney, who was watching me over his glasses with a faint smile. Arthur Coleman, I request you enter into the record that I am fully accepting the duties of executor and administrator of my late husband's estate, including the management of the archive. Please forward a copy of the protocol to my email within the hour. Without waiting for a response, I left the office. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, to a decisive click. The drive home passed in a blur, but my mind was sharp, cutting away all excess emotion. Back at the estate, I didn't bother taking off my coat. I walked past the parlor, where Chanel's perfume still lingered, and went straight to the heavy oak door of my office at the end of the hall. I turned the knob. The air inside was cool and smelled of old paper, sealing wax, and dust, the scent of order. Along the walls stood rows of filing cabinets and shelves packed with binders. Here, in these cardboard boxes, was the chronicle of the city's life, land disputes of the 90s, illegal privatizations of the early 2000s, city planning commission protocols. Elias collected the intelligence. I systematized it. He was the hunter. I was the keeper. I sat down at my old, massive desk and powered up the computer. The monitor flickered, lighting the room with a pale glow. Dominic thought I was a dusty relic, technologically clueless. He forgot I was the one who implemented the electronic document management system at the court while he was still cheating on exams. My fingers rested habitually on the keyboard. I logged into the electronic justice portal. My consultant access was still active. Judges often asked me to help them draft complex archival extracts. Now, I wasn't just locking the doors of the house. I was raising a legal fortress around it. I pulled up the template for a motion-seeking injunctive relief. My fingers flew over the keys. Plaintiff, Rhonda Sterling, as executor of the estate. Subject, prohibition of all registration actions concerning the property. Grounds, threat of loss of inherited property. I cited the relevant state statute, attached the will scan Arthur had already sent me, and added a point about the disputed legal status of the buildings. I clicked Sign with e-signature. My sword in the digital world. The system hesitated for a second, then gave a green notification. Motion filed, case number assigned. That was it. In 15 minutes, that number would appear in the county recorder's database. Any attempt to sell, gift, or demolish the house would be automatically blocked. If Dominic showed up with a bulldozer, he wouldn't just be violating my word, he'd be violating a court order. That wasn't a family squabble, that was a felony. I let out a breath and leaned back in my chair. My hands, resting on the desk, were steady. I felt a strange calm, as if I were back at work after a long vacation, now the safe. It was hidden behind a false panel on one of the shelves. Elias didn't trust electronics for such things. Good old-fashioned mechanical lock. I dialed the combination, the date of our wedding and the number of the statute under which we won our first joint case. Click. The heavy door swung open. Inside was a single folder made of thick gray cardboard. No labels. I pulled it out, feeling the weight of the paper. I opened the folder. The first item was a contract. Heavy paper, watermarks, an agreement for the sale of the land and structures. Buyer, Chempro Industries, LLC. Seller, Dominic Sterling, by power of attorney. I flipped the page, scanning the standard clauses, looking for the catch. Dominic wanted to sell the land for a factory. I already knew that. But why did Elias say Dominic had set me up? Then I saw it. Attachment number 3 to the contract, leaseback and operational liability agreement. I squinted at the fine print. The cold I had felt in the attorney's office seemed like a slight chill compared to the icy horror that gripped me now. Under this clause, after the sale, the title transferred to the company, but the user and responsible party for the condition of the soil and groundwater during the 5-year construction preparation period was designated as the current occupant. Me. Dominic wasn't just selling the house. He was selling the property as a toxic waste dump. But the most terrifying part was elsewhere. The contract stipulated that any environmental fines, reclamation costs, and cleanup expenses for contaminated land would fall entirely on the responsible occupant. He knew. He knew the company planned to dump waste here even before the official construction began. And he structured the contract so that when the EPA or the district attorney's office came checking and found toxins, the criminal case wouldn't be filed against the chemical giant or against him, the one who got the money. It would be filed against me. The folder contained one more document. Project Epicenter, a map of the groundwater. Red arrows indicated that waste from the future plant would flow directly into the city river, poisoning the municipal water supply. My son didn't just want to kick me out. He planned to make me the scapegoat in an environmental catastrophe to cover his deal. He was willing to send his own mother to federal prison just to buy himself a seat in the state legislature. I closed the folder. The sound of the cover snapping shut was like a shot. I ran my palm over the rough cardboard. I was no longer a mother. I was a plaintiff. And a plaintiff has no familial feelings. A plaintiff has only evidence. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke my trance. Gravel crunched aggressively under the tires. That's how people drive when they think the earth beneath them belongs to them by birthright. I peered out the window through the blinds. Dominic's black SUV, followed by a beat-up sedan with a sticker reading 24/7 locksmith service, and another car, a silver sedan I didn't recognize. They came earlier than I expected. Dominic, Chanel, a scrawny guy with a toolbox, and a tall man in a gray coat with a leather briefcase tucked under his arm. A specialist, I realized. A lawyer Dominic brought to intimidate me with terms I knew better than the multiplication table. I didn't go downstairs. I stayed in my office, watching through the window like a general on a hill. They approached the porch. Dominic barked something at the locksmith, pointing at the door. The man nodded, crouched down, and pulled out his picks. Chanel stood nearby, tapping her heel impatiently on the old deck boards. But then the locksmith froze. He slowly straightened up and pointed to the sheet of paper I had taped to the door 20 minutes ago, a regular letter-size sheet placed in a clear plastic sleeve to protect it from the dampness. Dominic ripped the sleeve off and brought the paper close to his eyes. I saw his back tense. He shoved the document under the nose of the man in the gray coat. The man scanned the text, and I saw his expression change from arrogant to worried, almost fearful. He said something to Dominic, shaking his head. Dominic screamed, gesturing wildly, but the lawyer stepped back as if afraid of catching failure. I knew what the paper said. It was a copy of the court notification with the electronic acceptance stamp, writ of attachment on property, case number HR estate matter, and a small postscript I added myself, citing the state criminal code section on trespassing and violation of a judicial order. The locksmith, hearing snippets of the conversation, silently gathered his tools into his case, grumbled something like, "I don't play those games," and walked toward his car. Chanel shrieked after him, but he didn't look back. Dominic remained on the porch, clutching my sheet of paper. Then he looked up directly at my office window. Our eyes met, Though he couldn't see me behind the blinds, he knew I was there. A minute later, my cell phone rang. "Open up, Mom. We need to talk." I went downstairs, opened the door, but didn't step aside, blocking the entrance with my body. "You will not enter the house," I said calmly. "According to the court order, third-party access is restricted until inventory is completed." "Third parties!" Chanel gasped in outrage. "I'm your son's wife!" "Legally, within the framework of the estate matter, you are a third party with no claim to the disputed asset," I clipped out. "And you, Dominic, are an interested party." The man in the gray coat discreetly coughed. "Dominic Sterling, your mother, ahem, she is formally correct. If we force entry now, it will be viewed as a violation of a judicial order. That's a misdemeanor at the very least. Considering your status—" Dominic gritted his teeth. He gestured for Chanel and the lawyer to go back to the car. "Mom." He changed his tone. Now the velvety notes he used to charm voters at rallies crept into his voice. He stepped closer, trying to take my hand. I didn't pull away, but my palm remained cold and unresponsive. "Mom, why the circus? You're retired. Why all the courts, the stress? You're tired. Look at you." He spoke softly, looking into my eyes with that false filial concern that made me sick. "I've already arranged an apartment, downtown, second floor, Parkview. Renovations, new furniture. You'll live like a queen. Just sign the waiver relinquishing your claim. I'll handle everything. You won't even have to go anywhere." "A waiver?" I asked, feigning the slight confusion of an elderly woman who didn't quite grasp the details. "But Dominic, the procedure is complicated. Form 12B requires a countersignature from the county land registry. Did you get it?" Dominic laughed, relieved and condescending. "Oh, Mom, what Form 12B? No one looks at those papers anymore. I have my people. You just sign a blank form and we'll fill everything else out. You know how this works." "I do know," I nodded. "I know that without a land registry verification, any deal involving property in a protected water zone is void. And our parcel, son, is right in such a zone." The smile slid from his face. "Are you mocking me?" he hissed. "I already took the money. You understand? The advance is spent. I have to close the deal this week, or the investors, they are not people you joke with." "And I am?" I asked softly. Dominic flinched as if I had struck him. Something new flickered in his eyes. Not annoyance, but fear. The genuine, sticky fear of a cornered animal. He realized I wasn't just being stubborn. I knew. "You'll regret this," he threw out, turning away. "You think your papers will save you. I have resources you've never heard of. We'll cut off everything. Power, water, oxygen. You'll come crawling back." He walked to the car. Chanel was already inside, furiously typing on her phone. The lawyer in the gray coat lingered to open Dominic's door. And in that moment, as he bent down, his coat split open, and I saw his silver sedan's license plate, AZ567MP. My professional memory, which held thousands of case numbers and surnames, clicked, delivering the result. I had seen that number in case summaries 5 years ago. The veteran's apartment fraud case. A disbarred lawyer convicted of forging powers of attorney. "Dominic!" I called out. He turned back, already gripping the door handle. "What now?" "Your lawyer," I nodded toward the man in gray. "Tell him that if he shows up on my porch one more time, I will send the State Bar Association a query regarding his status and a copy of his 5-year-old conviction record. I doubt his probation is over yet." The man in gray froze. He slowly turned his head to me, and his face became the color of the very asphalt he was standing on. He whispered something quickly to Dominic and got into the car. Dominic looked at me with pure hatred, but said nothing. The door slammed, the engine roared, and the convoy sped away, raising a cloud of dust. I remained standing on the porch. My small victory had a bitter taste. Dominic was desperate. He used a disbarred fraudster because no honest lawyer would touch such a dirty deal. That meant any document that man prepared was legally vulnerable. My son wasn't just sloppy, he was in a panic. And panic makes people make mistakes. All I had to do was wait and log them. I went back into the house and locked every deadbolt. But now I knew. They would return, and next time, they wouldn't come with papers. Dominic had mentioned investors, the kind you don't joke with. I went upstairs to my office. I needed to know more. What was Chempro Industries, LLC? Who was behind them, and why were they in such a rush? I sat down at the computer. My workday was just beginning. The cursor blinked on the empty search bar like a nervous tick. I didn't type the company name into a regular search engine. There, I'd only find a beautiful website with pictures of happy employees and green meadows. No, I needed the truth, and the truth doesn't hide in advertising brochures. It hides in court archives. I opened my legal database and entered Chempro Industries, LLC into the search bar. The system thought for a moment, sifting through gigabytes of data. Result: 412 documents found. I clicked on the Case Law tab. The list was endless. Claims for damages to health, environmental violations, a class action lawsuit from the residents of Riverside Village. But almost everywhere the note read, "Proceedings terminated due to settlement or case closed. Materials sealed by defendant's motion. Commercial confidentiality." They bought their way out, paid pennies to the victims, silenced officials, and kept poisoning the earth. But I knew one loophole. Administrative cases, unlike civil ones, remain in the public domain longer, and they are harder to completely scrub from the database, especially if you know the initial protocol number. I started digging deeper, using date and region filters. 1 hour, 2 hours. My eyes were tired, my back ached, but I didn't stop. Finally, I found a 5-year-old arbitration court ruling, a small fine for violating disposal regulations for Class 1 hazardous waste. Attached was a list of chemicals: mercury, cadmium, phenol. I cross-referenced this list with the Project Epicenter map from Elias's safe. It all checked out. They weren't just building a factory, they were looking for a cheap place to bury what couldn't be processed. And our property, with its old karst sinkholes, was perfect for hiding the poison deep underground. Except those sinkholes were connected to the municipal aquifer. If Dominic sold the house within a year, half the city would be drinking water that tasted of phenol, and according to the documents, I would be the one to blame. Suddenly, the computer screen went dark. The whirring of the tower ceased. The desk lamp flickered and died. Darkness and silence enveloped the house, broken only by the drumming of rain on the roof. I flipped the light switch. Nothing. I looked out the window. The neighbors' lights were on, not a general outage. I pulled out my phone. A message from an unknown number flashed on the screen. "We have a technical glitch. The team will be out in 3 days. Or sign the documents and the power will be back on in 5 minutes. Dominic." He moved from threats to action. He thought the old woman would be scared of the dark, that without electricity or heat, I would surrender. He forgot I survived the 90s, when rolling blackouts were the norm, and we typed up judgments in the court using typewriters by candlelight. I found the flashlight in my desk drawer. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the shelves of legal code books. I went to the shelf where the old municipal bulletins were kept. 1982, City Council Resolution Number 45B. I found it, a yellowed page smelling of age, on the status of objects containing archives of state importance. Back then, my house, then city property, was a temporary repository for the county recorder's archive, and that status was never officially revoked. Under Clause 4, disconnecting life support from such objects without written approval from the district attorney's office was prohibited. I dialed the utility company's emergency line. "Hello, dispatch." The young woman on the other end sounded bored. "This is Rhonda Sterling, 425 Oakmont Drive. My power has been cut. Do you have an outstanding balance or is it scheduled maintenance? Please wait. Ma'am, write this number down." I cut her off with my courtroom tone, the one that used to make clerks run cold. City Council Resolution of March 12, 1982, Number 45B, State Criminal Code Section 215.1, Cessation or Restriction of Electrical Supply. Does your supervisor, Mr. Johnson, know that shutting down a facility with special archive status carries up to 5 years imprisonment? Silence hung in the receiver. What kind of archive? The girl asked, flustered. Archival? I replied. You have exactly 1 hour to restore service. Otherwise, in 1 hour and 1 minute, I am calling the duty prosecutor and dictating a criminal complaint, and I will name you as an accomplice. Time starts now. I hung up. 40 minutes later, the bulb above the ceiling flickered and came on with a steady yellow light. The computer beeped, loading up. Dominic thought he ran the city, but the city was run by regulations, and I knew them better than anyone. But I knew this was only a temporary reprieve. I went to the kitchen to make tea. My hands were shaking a little, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. Then, a soft knock on the door. Not the aggressive banging from the daytime, but a timid, barely audible tap. I approached the door without opening it. Who is it? Rhonda Sterling? It's Kendra, Chanel's assistant. I froze. The girl who was always running after my daughter-in-law with piles of shopping bags, whose eyes were perpetually red from lack of sleep and tears. Why is she here? A trap? I'm alone, she whispered through the door. Please, it's important. I cracked the door, keeping the security chain latched. Kendra stood on the porch, soaked from the rain in a thin trench coat. She was shivering. In her hands, she clutched a small flash drive. Take this! She pushed the drive through the gap. Chanel, she's furious right now. She and Dominic think you're asleep or without power. What is this? I asked, taking the cold plastic. They're forging your signature, the girl quickly said, looking back at the dark street. Right now, Dominic's found some engraver. They're making a facsimile. They want to backdate a gift deed claiming you signed it a week ago, before Elias died, to bypass your court injunction. I looked at this scared girl and saw myself 40 years ago, just as naive, believing in justice, but crushed by the power of the high and mighty. Why are you helping me? I asked. Kendra sniffled. Chanel fired me today. Said I bought the wrong sparkling wine and threw a shoe at me. She gave a bitter little chuckle. I heard you talking to them this afternoon. You're the only one they're afraid of. Please, make them pay. She turned and ran off, disappearing into the rainy darkness. I closed the door, clenching the flash drive. Forgery of a signature. Using a facsimile on documents transferring real estate title. That wasn't just fraud. That was grand larceny, a major felony, up to 10 years. I returned to the computer and inserted the flash drive. The folder was labeled Scan Draft. I opened the file. It was a scan of the gift deed. The date was 1 week prior. The signature looked like mine, very much so. The engraver had done good work, but they made a mistake, a fatal, stupid mistake that only a professional would catch. I zoomed in on the image, the color of the ink. They used a black gel pen. But 1 week ago, on the date they put on the deed, I was at the hospital with Elias, and I signed the medical consent form with a blue ballpoint pen for an IV drip. Only blue, because in government agencies and notary offices, strict documentation must be signed in blue ink to distinguish the original from a copy. That rule is hardwired into my brain. I never carry black pens. If I could find a copy of that medical consent with the date and time, I would have irrefutable evidence that at the moment of the alleged signing, I physically could not have used a black gel pen, being in the ICU. But time was short. They planned to register this forged deed tomorrow morning as soon as the recorder's office opened, using their connections to fast-track it. I had to act preemptively, and a plan began to form. A plan that required not just knowledge of the law, but acting skills. Tomorrow morning, I would go to them myself, not to surrender, but to snap the trap shut. I didn't sleep all night, not from fear, but from focus. I sat at my desk, arranging the documents before me like a solitaire game. A copy of the medical consent, which I obtained through the hospital's electronic record system, lay next to the printout of the forged deed from Kendra's flash drive. The difference was obvious, even to the naked eye, but for the court, I needed more than just the ink color. I needed their panic. The morning was gray and damp. The clock struck 9. The 24 hours Chanel gave me had expired. I knew they would come, and they didn't disappoint. The screech of tires, the slamming of car doors. This time, there was no locksmith or lawyer, only Dominic and Chanel. They stormed onto the property without even trying the doorbell. Chanel picked up a rock and hurled it through the parlor window. The crash of breaking glass sounded like the signal for attack. "Come out, you old witch!" she shrieked, her usually flawless face twisted with fury. "Time is up! We have the documents! The house is ours!" Dominic stood slightly behind her, breathing heavily. He looked haggard, his tie askew. "Mom, don't make this harder," he said hoarsely. "The police are on their way. They'll haul you out of here in handcuffs for illegal retention of private property." I slowly walked down the porch steps. I wore the strict gray dress I wore to work for the last 5 years. In my hand, I held the folder. "You are violating the peace," I said calmly, watching Chanel raise her arm for a second throw. "State Code, Section 20.1, Disorderly Conduct." "I don't care about your statutes," she screamed. "We just came from the recorder's office. The deed is registered. We have the gift deed with your signature. You're nobody here." Dominic flinched. "A gift deed?" I repeated. "The one where my signature was made with a black gel pen?" Dominic flinched. "How do you—" "And the date is the 15th, I continued, giving him no time to recover. "On that day, Dominic, I was in the ICU with your father, signing a medical consent form with a blue ballpoint pen for an IV drip. The hospital hallway cameras record 24/7. A forensics expert will prove the forgery in 1 day. And then, this is no longer a civil dispute, son. It's a felony, falsification of documents for the purpose of grand larceny of property." Chanel froze, her arm dropping the rock. "But that's not all." I turned to my daughter-in-law. "Chanel, you were so eager to own this house. Did you read the contract your husband signed with Chempro Industries, LLC?" "What Chempro?" She blinked, confused, looking from me to her husband. Dominic turned whiter. "Dominic didn't tell you?" I feigned genuine surprise. "He sold the land for a toxic waste storage facility, but the most interesting part is the liability clause." I opened the folder and pulled out a copy of attachment number 3. "Read this, Chanel, clause 4.2. In the event of failure to recover damages from the primary responsible occupant, i.e., ME, subsidiary liability shall be borne by the spouse as the benefit recipient who provided notarial consent to the transaction." "You gave consent for the sale, didn't you?" Chanel snatched the paper from my hands. Her eyes darted over the lines. "What does this mean?" Her voice trembled. "It means," I explained in an icy tone, "that when the Environmental Protection Agency finds phenol here and issues a fine for a couple of $100 million, they won't just take Dominic's office. They'll take your beauty salon, your car, your jewelry, and even that condo you bought in Spain. You will be bankrupt, Chanel, and you will face court as an accomplice to an environmental crime." Chanel slowly raised her eyes to her husband. They were filled with horror melting into fury. You said it was just selling the land for townhomes," she hissed. "You set me up." "Chanel, wait! She's bluffing!" Dominic screamed, trying to grab her arm. "Bluffing?" I smirked. "Call your lawyer, the one with the fake license. Ask him what subsidiary liability means in an environmental lawsuit." The alliance crumbled before my eyes. Chanel pushed Dominic away. "Idiot!" she shrieked. "You'll ruin us all!" She turned from him and looked at the house. A mad thought flashed in her eyes. "The documents," she whispered. "If there are no documents, there's no case." "Chanel, what are you doing?" Dominic yelled, as she ran to the car and pulled a red jerry can from the trunk. "We'll burn this shack down," she screamed, tearing off the cap. "We'll say it was the wiring. Insurance will cover everything, and there won't be any forensics, no ink, no signatures." "Stop!" Dominic tried to grab her, but she splashed gasoline directly onto the porch. The acrid smell of fuel hit my nose, mixing with the scent of damp earth. I stood motionless. Inside, everything was twisting, but I knew I couldn't stop them physically. I was an old woman against two people crazed by fear and greed. But I had a weapon more powerful than force. Chanel pulled out a lighter. "Get out, Rhonda," she screamed at me, "or burn with your papers." At that moment, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. It wasn't a signal from the police or the fire department. I calmly took out the phone, pressed one button, and brought it to my ear. "Arthur Coleman," I said loudly enough for them to hear. "Launch Protocol 7. Dominic froze. "What? What protocol?" I looked at him with pity. "Did you think I would just sit here and wait for you to kill me?" Protocol 7 was a term from our old court practice, securing evidence in real time. I turned the phone screen toward them. The display showed a video connection, the district attorney's office crest, and the caption, "Recording in progress. Connection to special investigations. Detective established." "Right now," I said, looking into the camera, "you are attempting to destroy private property by dangerous means. State Code, Section 167.2, arson. Up to 5 years. Plus attempted homicide. As you know, I am in the house." Chanel, lighter in hand, froze like a pillar of salt. "But that's not all," I continued. "Dominic, you're supposed to be speaking at City Hall today at the Environmental Summit, right?" He remained silent, staring at the phone as if it were a snake. "I didn't just call a detective," I said softly. "I rerouted the signal. Right now, Dominic, you are live, but not on your wife's Instagram." "Where?" he whispered. "On the big screen in the City Hall auditorium," I replied. "The mayor, the press, and your constituents are sitting there right now. They're waiting for your speech on a clean city, and they are watching you with a jerry can of gasoline and your wife with a lighter." In the silence hanging over the yard, I heard the distant, distorted murmur of voices coming from my phone's speaker. It was the roar of the crowd in the assembly hall. Chanel dropped the lighter. It fell into the puddle of gasoline, but thankfully it didn't ignite. The flame didn't catch, but something else did. Realization in my son's eyes. The understanding that his career, his reputation, his life had just turned to ash. And for that, I hadn't needed a single match. Dominic collapsed to his knees right into the mud. His expensive suit was instantly soaked, but he didn't even notice. He stared at my phone screen, where the small window showed the packed administration hall. People in the background were standing up. Someone was filming the big screen, which was broadcasting our scene, with their phones. The murmur from the speaker grew, turning into a storm. "Turn it off!" he choked out, stretching his trembling hands toward me. "Mom, please, turn it off. I'll give it all back. The house, the land, everything. Just turn it off." Chanel stood with her hands clamped over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. She slowly backed toward the car, hoping that if she stepped out of the frame, she would disappear from reality. I didn't turn off the broadcast. I held the phone steady, the way I held the seal on a judgment. "You don't understand, Dominic," I said. And my voice, amplified by the speakers in the City Hall auditorium, sounded like a tolling bell. "This isn't a negotiation. This is an arraignment." I took a step toward him. The smell of gasoline still hung in the air, mixing with the scent of his fear. "You were ready to burn the house your father built. You were ready to poison the city you grew up in. And for what? For money that you already had enough of." "I had to!" he suddenly screamed, dissolving into hysterics. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the mud. "They would have killed me. The investors, they're not just businessmen, Mom. They're gangsters. I took their money for this project, and if I don't give them the land..." He sobbed, burying his face in his hands. A pathetic, broken man, not a politician or a mover, but a terrified boy who got caught playing grown-up games. Gangsters are only scary to those who live outside the law, I replied, and I live by the law. And now, son, you will too. I turned the camera to myself. Distinguished District Attorney, I addressed the invisible party on the other side of the line. I, Rhonda Sterling, officially report attempted arson and threat of homicide. All present in the auditorium are witnesses. Please consider this video recording official evidence and also attach the documents concerning the illegal land deal and the environmental threat, copies of which I have already sent to your server. A voice, strict and authoritative, came through the speaker. I recognized it. It was the district attorney himself, whom I knew was attending the meeting. The statement is accepted, Rhonda Sterling. Police and a forensic team are en route. No one is to leave the scene. Dominic looked up. The last flicker of hope died in his eyes. He realized this was the end. Not just a scandal, this was prison. Chanel, hearing about the police, shrieked and ran toward the car. "I had nothing to do with this," she screamed, yanking the door handle. "It was all him. He forced me. I'm just a wife." She jumped behind the wheel, started the engine. The black SUV roared. "Chanel, stop!" Dominic yelled, trying to stand up, but his feet slipped on the wet grass. The car sped away, tearing up clods of earth. She raced toward the gate, cutting through the peony beds Elias loved so much. But I didn't move. I knew something she didn't. The car drove about 20 yards and then, as if hitting an invisible wall, lurched violently and stalled. Chanel cranked the ignition, beat the steering wheel, but the engine was silent. I slowly walked toward the stalled vehicle. Chanel thrashed inside like a trapped bird, yanking at the locked doors. "Electronics," I said calmly, looking at her through the glass. "Modern cars are so vulnerable." Dominic finally stood up and staggered toward me. "What did you do?" he asked dully. "Yesterday," I replied, not looking at him. "When I filed the motion for injunctive relief, I included this car in the property inventory. It's registered to you, Dominic, which means it is subject to seizure until the investigation concludes." I pulled out a second phone, Elias's old flip phone. I also called the leasing company. I notified them that the vehicle was at risk of destruction and being used to commit a felony. They have a function for remote satellite engine disablement. I simply asked them to activate it. Dominic stared at me as if I were an alien. You calculated everything?" "No," I shook my head. "I just read the lease agreement. Clause 8-4, lessor's right to forced vehicle stop upon threat of loss. You never read the fine print, son. That's your downfall." The wail of sirens grew louder in the distance. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees. Chanel in the car stopped thrashing and just sat there covering her face with her hands. Dominic's shoulders slumped. "Why, Mom?" he asked quietly. "You could have just given us the house. We would have given you money. You could have lived comfortably. Why did you destroy us?" I looked at him. There was no triumph in my eyes, only exhaustion and a deep, ancient sorrow. "I didn't destroy you, Dominic. I saved you from yourselves, from what you became. Money, power. They ate your soul. Perhaps where you're going, you will have time to think and remember that you are the son of Elias and Rhonda Sterling, people who served the law, not sold it." Police cars drove into the yard. Men in uniform spilled out. I saw a familiar face, Captain Hayes, the precinct commander. 20 years ago, I taught him, then a young officer, how to properly file a crime scene report. He approached me, taking off his hat. "Rhonda Sterling," he nodded respectfully, with a hint of embarrassment. "We got the signal. Everything's recorded." I handed him the phone with the recording. "Attempted arson, threat, physical evidence, the gasoline can, and the lighter on the porch. Please process the seizure according to all regulations. And kindly," I nodded toward Dominic, "read them their Miranda rights, clearly and distinctly, so there are no procedural complaints later." Hayes nodded and turned to his men. "Detain them. Secure the scene. Get witnesses." I stepped aside toward the old apple tree. I watched the handcuffs click shut on my son's wrists. I saw a weeping Chanel being led out of the car. But it wasn't over yet. There was one last move, the most devastating one, the one that would ruin not just their freedom, but the very basis of their greed. The district attorney's investigator, a young man in glasses, approached me. "Rhonda Sterling, we need to seize the documents for the house to attach to the case file." "Of course," I said, "but there is one nuance." I opened my folder and pulled out an old, yellowed sheet of parchment. It wasn't a copy, it was the original. "What is this?" the investigator asked. "This, young man," I said, flattening the paper, "is the deed of conveyance from 1898, the original document for the land this house stands on. My great-grandfather purchased this land from the Municipal Society." Dominic, being led toward the police car, heard this and turned around. "What difference does it make?" he yelled. "The land is still mine under the will." "No, Dominic," I said loudly. "It's not yours, and it's not even mine." I pointed to a line written in faded ink, but still readable. "There are conditions here, what's called a reversionary interest. The land was transferred to private ownership on the condition that it be used exclusively for residence, gardening, and good behavior. In the event of industrial or other commercial use that harms the public, the title of ownership is automatically annulled, and the land reverts to the city, without compensation." I looked at my son. "By signing the contract with the chemical company, Dominic, you officially confirmed the intention to use the land for an industrial purpose. You activated this clause with your own hands. From the moment you signed that contract, this land no longer belongs to the Sterling family. It belongs to the city." Dominic froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You sold something you no longer owned, son," I concluded. "You're not just a thief, you're bankrupt. And Chempro Industries LLC will now be suing the municipality, who will happily take this parcel back for a public park to cover up the scandal." Dominic was pushed into the car. The door slammed shut, cutting him off from me, from the house, from the past. I remained standing in the garden. The rain had stopped. The clouds parted, and a faint ray of sunshine broke through. I inhaled the air. It smelled of wet earth, apples, and freedom, bitter, heavy, but freedom nonetheless. The window of the police car rolled down, and Dominic's distorted face peered out. "It's a deep fake!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "You staged everything! The video is fake! That paper is a forgery! I know how this works! Captain, arrest her! She was conducting illegal surveillance! Criminal Code Section 137, invasion of privacy!" Captain Hayes, standing next to me, tiredly rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Dominic Sterling," he said calmly, "calm down." "I won't calm down," my son spat, foam gathering at his mouth. "She filmed me with a hidden camera. That's illegally obtained evidence. It has no power in court. You have no right to arrest me based on a fake." I looked at him with cold pity. Even now, in handcuffs, he was trying to use scraps of legal knowledge to wiggle out, but he forgot again who he was dealing with. "Private life, Dominic," I said, approaching the car, "ends where the commission of a felony begins. According to the Supreme Court ruling, a video recording made to document illegal acts and defend one's rights is not an invasion of privacy." I turned to the captain. "Captain Hayes, the defendant's glove compartment contains a folder of documents, the contract with Chempro Industries LLC. I believe that is sufficient grounds for opening a case of grand larceny, as he sold municipal land, pretending it was his own." Hayes nodded to one of the officers. The officer opened the door of Dominic's SUV, dove into the cabin, and emerged a second later with a thick leather folder. "Got it, Captain." Dominic went pale. He knew his last card was played, but then a scream erupted from the other police car where Chanel was seated. The door flew open, and my daughter-in-law, disheveled, mascara running, broke free from the young female officer. "Let go!" she shrieked. "I didn't sign anything! I didn't know! I'm a victim!" She ran toward me, falling to her knees in the mud, staining her expensive stockings. Rhonda Sterling, Mommy, she sobbed, grabbing the hem of my coat. Forgive me, I didn't mean to. He forced me. He said he'd leave me penniless if I didn't help. I just wanted to save my family. I looked down at her, a woman who, an hour ago, had called me a dusty relic and planned to burn my house down. She was pathetic and repulsive in her betrayal, but there was truth in her words. A wife's testimony was the nail in Dominic's coffin. Captain, I said, peeling her hands from my coat, the citizen is expressing a desire to cooperate with the investigation. I believe she should be granted that opportunity, under State Statute 61, as a mitigating circumstance. Hayes nodded. Take her, he commanded. Chanel was lifted from the mud and led back to the car. She no longer resisted, only whimpering and muttering something about a lawyer. Dominic watched this through the glass. His wife had betrayed him as easily as he had betrayed me. The circle was complete. The police convoy drove off. The cars, their lights flashing, slowly exited the gates. I remained standing in the yard, surrounded by a silence that seemed deafening after all the noise. Next to me was only the district attorney's investigator and a couple of forensics experts who were packaging the jerry can in a plastic bag. Rhonda Sterling, the investigator approached me. We need to inspect the house to make sure there are no other surprises. Of course, I nodded. Come in. We walked into the house. It was quiet and cool inside. I led them to the office. The investigator whistled when he saw my shelves. Serious archive, he noted. That's a month of work. Take what you need, I said, but I'll keep one folder for myself. I walked to the desk and picked up the folder labeled Project Epicenter. This is a copy. I transferred the original to your superiors electronically. And this is for my memory. The investigator nodded in understanding. Fine. We'll be done here in about 2 hours. Do you have somewhere to stay? Maybe a hotel? No, I said firmly. This is my house, and I'm staying here. When they went to the other rooms, I approached the window. The silver sedan of the disbarred lawyer was still sitting in the driveway. He must have fled on foot, abandoning his car when he realized the deal had gone up in smoke. I smirked. Another trophy. I took out my phone and dialed Arthur Coleman. Hello. It's over, Arthur, I said. They're arrested. I heard a sigh of relief on the line. Thank goodness, Rhonda. Are you okay? I'm fine. I felt the tiredness settle on my shoulders like a heavy cloak. Arthur, I need you to prepare the documents. What documents? For the inheritance? No, for the land transfer. What? The attorney's voice wavered. To whom? To the city, I replied, just as the deed of conveyance stated, but with a condition. What condition? Lifelong right of occupancy and use of the house for me, and historical landmark status for the estate, so that no dog can ever build anything here again, neither a factory nor a pool table. Arthur was silent. That's genius, Rhonda. You're giving them what they could have taken by court anyway, but you're dictating your terms. You're turning defeat into victory. It's not a victory, Arthur, I said, looking at the empty road where my son had been driven away. It's just justice. I hung up. Just then, a tow truck pulled into the yard. The driver got out looking around. Ma'am, am I taking the car? He yelled, pointing to Dominic's SUV. I stepped onto the porch. No, I said. Leave the SUV. It's under arrest. Take this one. I pointed to Chanel's luxury convertible, which was parked in the garage. I remembered her boasting about it, a gift from her husband for her patients. What about it? The driver asked. It has a lien placed on it to secure a civil lawsuit, I explained. I filed it yesterday, a claim for emotional distress and compensation for medical expenses. Medical expenses? The driver asked, surprised. Yes, nerves, you know. I smiled faintly. Old age is no joke. The driver grunted and began hooking up the winch. I watched as the red car, the symbol of my daughter-in-law's vanity, was pulled onto the platform. A stuffed toy, a pink bunny, dangled from the rear-view mirror. It looked pathetically sad. Where to? The driver asked, getting into the cab. To the impound lot, I replied. And tell them to put a boot on it, just in case it tries to drive off." The tow truck left. The yard settled into complete silence. I went back into the house and sat in Elias's chair. It was too big for me, but right now, it felt like it was embracing me. I closed my eyes. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to relax. My muscles ached, my head pounded, but my chest was quiet. The terrible pressure that had tormented me since the funeral was gone. I opened my eyes and looked at my husband's portrait on the wall. "Well, Elias Sterling," I whispered, "we did it. The archive is safe, the house is standing. And our son? Our son got the lesson we couldn't give him when he was a boy." I knew the courts were ahead, long, grueling processes. Dominic would hire lawyers, he would file appeals, Chanel would weep on talk shows. But that no longer scared me. I was in my element. I was the plaintiff, the witness, and the keeper. And I had work to do. I walked over to the desk, took a clean sheet of paper and a pen, blue this time, and wrote at the top of the sheet, "Archive Reorganization Plan. Goal: creation of a legal aid center. If I couldn't save my son from corruption, I would save others, those who had no voice, those who were considered dust. I would give them the weapon that saved me, the law." 2 months passed. The lilacs bloomed in the garden, filling the air with a sweet, intoxicating scent that overpowered even the smell of old paper in my office. But this office was no longer just a repository of the past. A new, neat sign hung over the porch: Municipal Legal Aid Center, public hours, Tuesday, Thursday. I sat at my massive desk, which was now covered not with dusty folders, but with fresh applications. Opposite me sat Maria Jones, my neighbor, clutching a handkerchief in her gnarled fingers. "Ronnie, they say the pension recalculation is correct, but I can see it," she began, her voice trembling. "Don't worry, Maria Jones." I confidently took her documents and stamped them. The dull, authoritative thud of the seal on the desk sounded like a promise of protection. They forgot to apply the coefficient for time served in the far north regions. Federal Statute 14. We will file a complaint today. I watched her shoulders straighten. To these people, forgotten by the system, I had become not just a neighbor, but the last resort. Iron Rhonda, as they now called me. Life had settled into a new groove. Dominic was under investigation. The papers wrote about the deputy mayor's case every day, savoring the details of his offshore accounts and illegal dealings. He was in county jail, and rumors were that his lawyers changed every week. No one wanted to sync with him. Chanel filed for divorce immediately after the first interrogation, trying to save the remnants of her assets, but my subsidiary liability claims froze her accounts. Now she lived with her mother in a run-down apartment and, they say, took a job as an administrator at a cheap hair salon. I didn't gloat. I just watched as the law, that relentless machine, ground down those who tried to break it. I took a sip of tea from my old porcelain cup. The taste was sharp and clean. I felt surprisingly light. The house belonged to the city, but I was its lifelong keeper. No one could kick me out again. No one could tear down these walls. I opened the bottom desk drawer. The folder labeled Dominic Rehabilitation Plan lay inside. I started it in a moment of weakness, thinking that maybe when he got out, in 5 or 7 years, I could help him start over. I looked at the folder, then took it out and slowly, with satisfaction, fed it into the shredder. The paper whined, turning into thin strips. "No," I said aloud to the empty room. "Rehabilitation is for those who make mistakes, but betrayal is not a mistake. It's a choice." I was free. Free from expectations, from the duty of a mother to save an adult man, from the fear of the future. My future was here, among these people who needed me. A knock came at the door. "Come in," I called out. A young mail carrier who always smiled at me stood on the threshold. "Rhonda Sterling, registered mail for you, from New York." I signed the notification. The envelope was thick with the logo of a major law firm, Counsel for Kempro Industries, LLC. My heart jumped, but only for a second. I slit the envelope with a letter opener. Inside was a lawsuit, but not against me or the city. Statement of claim for recovery of damages in the nature of recourse. Plaintiff, Chempro Industries LLC. Defendant, Dominic Sterling. Amount of claim, $150 million. $150,000. I quickly scanned the text. My lips curved into a smile. They demanded the return of the advance and compensation for lost profits. But the most beautiful part was in the justification. In connection with the contract being declared void due to the seller's lack of authority, and also in connection with the discovered fact of forgery, which was noted by Ms. Rhonda Sterling in her statement. And at the very end, in fine print, the contract is deemed void as it lacks the required witness signature on behalf of the seller for real estate transactions in zones of special risk. I laughed a quiet, dry laugh that echoed off the walls of the office. I remembered the day I found the contract in the safe. I had noticed that the witness line was empty. Dominic was in such a rush he forgot to ask someone to sign, and in my statement to the district attorney, I had carefully, almost casually, pointed out that procedural defect. That defect was now costing him $150 million. It was the final nail. Even if he gets out of prison, he will owe that corporation for the rest of his life. I took a marker and wrote a single large letter on the envelope. J. Justice. Then I opened the cabinet and placed the folder on the shelf between Maria Jones's case and a consumer protection claim. The sun was setting outside, painting the sky in crimson tones. I turned off the computer, extinguished the lamp. My workday was over, but my work was just beginning. I walked out onto the porch, breathing in the cool evening air. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and I heard children laughing. Life continued, and I was part of it. Not dust, not a relic, but a foundation. I adjusted my shawl on my shoulders and smiled. Well, I said to the quiet, tomorrow is Tuesday, public hours, gotta prepare. And so ends the story of Rhonda Sterling, the Iron Clerk, who proved that knowledge of the law and internal strength can crush even the most seemingly invincible opponents. This story is more than a drama of family betrayal. It is a reminder that dignity and professionalism are weapons that are always with you. What do you think? Did Rhonda do the right thing? Did she, in essence, send her son to prison and strip him of everything with her own hands? Was this an act of ultimate justice, or the cruelty of a mother who couldn't forgive betrayal? Or perhaps it was the only way to save his soul, stopping his fall into the abyss of corruption. Let us know your opinion in the comments. We are very interested to hear whose side you are on in this conflict. If you liked this story and want to know what happened to Rhonda next, what new cases she had to tackle at her legal aid center, and if Dominic tried to contact her from prison, be sure to let us know. We'd be happy to continue telling the story of her fight for justice. Please don't forget to hit the like button if this video touched your heart and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new stories. Your support inspires us to create more quality content for you. We wish you all the best. A window will appear in the center of the screen at the end of this video. Click on it to watch our other most captivating stories.